Today, we are opening the sessions with the panel Cross-Border Open Innovation Initiatives that will be moderated by Secretary Pedro Ivo Ferraz da Silva. He is the Head of Science, Technology, and Innovation and Technical Cooperation at the Embassy of Brazil in Berlin, and he is also Executive Coordinator of InnSciD. Secretary Pedro Ivo, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Gabriela. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. I would like to greet the participants of the 2022 edition of InnSciD. And since this is one of the 3 open sessions of our school, I would also like to salute our friends who are following us live through YouTube channel of the Institute of Advanced Studies of the University of São Paulo. This panel is devoted to the discussion around international open innovation initiatives. And for that, we have gathered a stellar group of panelists composed of specialists from the public and the private sectors. For those who are not familiar with the term open innovation, I think it can be roughly be described as the strategic process through which corporations open up their research and development processes and engage with external entities such as universities, technical research institutions, startups, and even competitors to enhance their innovation capabilities. So this tendency stands in stark contrast with the more traditional approach of in-house R&D, whereby companies prefer to keep all their research and development activities within closed doors in their own organizational structure. In the past years, open innovation has become more and more frequently cross-border, as companies have also been looking for innovation partners abroad. So our panelists today will share with us some interesting and successful examples of such international open innovation partnerships, and as well as some programs that incentivizes this kind of connections, international connections. I'm happy to welcome in our panel Dr. Israel Gloger, or Isro, as they call him, who is today a biopharmaceutical and drug discovery consultant for international partnerships and had a long career in the British pharma giant GlaxoSmithKline, GSK, where he acted, among other responsibilities, as coordinator of GSK R&D investment in Latin America. We also have the honor to welcome Professor Jorge Guimarães, who is the president of the Brazilian Company for Research and Industrial Innovation, Embrapi. I think it's rather difficult to summarize Professor Jorge's CV in just a few words, but let me just indicate that he has held various positions in various Brazilian scientific agencies and institutions, including he was the president of CAPES, Brazil's main funding grant awarding body of graduate researchers. He was also Secretary of Strategic Policies and Scientific Development in the Ministry of Science Technology of Brazil. We are also very happy to welcome here today Mr. Bruno Vaz Sapelon, who is the Director for Innovation and Sustainability of the German-Brazilian Chamber of São Paulo, also known as AHK São Paulo. And among other initiatives, Bruno has been leading the Startups Connected program, which aims precisely at fostering ties between startups and corporations through concrete industrial challenges. I'm not sure if Rodrigo has arrived. I don't think so. But while we wait for For him, we would start this panel with individual presentations or interventions of each of these speakers for about 8-10 minutes, and followed by a discussion, and then concluded with questions from the participants. So to start, I would like to hand over the floor to Dr. Israel Gloger. Israel, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Da Silva. It's a real pleasure for me to be here and to be able to share my experiences over the last really 15 years in working with Latin America. I have to say I've been in GSK for over 33 years. I retired last year after a long career. And I'm a molecular biologist, I'm a pure scientist. And the chance, as I am originally from Argentina, although I've been living in England for many, many, many years, from the beginning, I was working in GSK, and this is anecdotal. I kept telling all the senior people that we needed to engage in Latin America, that Latin America was a source of great scientific developments that sometimes were not known to people because sometimes there was no access to journals and so on. The opportunity came when our chairman of R&D visited Brazil on a commercial visit and called me back, and I got a little, you don't get a call from the chairman of R&D every day when you're in company, and if you get a call, you think there is something wrong happening, and they don't want you anymore. Anyway, he called me and say, I need to talk to you. And I said, look, I've been to Brazil. It's unbelievable what I've seen there. I want you to start a project in Latin America. And he said to me something that I will always remember. And he say, I don't care where the good science is. I want to be where the good science is, whether it's anywhere. So we started a project. I had to figure out from zero a project of collaborations with Latin America, which we call Trust in Science. And the reason we call it Trust in Science, because I think the title is absolutely brilliant. We wanted as a company to believe that we are going to collaborate on good science in Latin America, but at the same time for the scientists in Latin America to believe that we were coming as a pharmaceutical company with good intentions. And I'll explain this in a minute. So we created a program that basically the first thing we did is we contacted the financing authorities in each country, and we worked in Brazil mainly and in Argentina, the first phase. Then we expanded to Mexico and Uruguay as well. And we say, look, we want to invest in this country. We want to invest in research. Would you like to collaborate with us? And we were really lucky to have a very good feedback in Brazil, in particular from FAPESP, and in Argentina from the Ministry of Science, and then later on the same in Mexico and in Uruguay. And they say, yes, we are going to match what you invest, and we are going to create funding for research proposals. So that was a major breakthrough. But the other thing we wanted to do, we didn't just want to give money and say, we are going to give you money, you go away, you do your research and come back and just write a report 3 months later or 3 years later. We wanted to be part of the research. We wanted to collaborate with these people, to have a project that they will feel that they are really, truly working together with us. So that was very, very important. And the other cornerstone, which was extremely important, was the intellectual property. And I know we are going to talk about this before, but we say in advance, whoever makes the discovery is the owner of the intellectual property. We do not want the intellectual property on discoveries that are being made by the academic people. What we do want as part of the agreement, because we are funding, is to have the first option. So if you discover something and you file IP, come and talk to us first. And if we are interested, we will license your, in good terms, we'll license. That was a bit of a surprise. And we can discuss this later in the questions because, academics were not really, they think, and I always call it that, they think that pharma companies are like a aspirator, like a Hoover that comes and they want to aspirate all the intellectual property and then they run away. And it took a few years actually to make sure that the whole community of scientists actually incorporated that. So we started this program, which I'm glad to say we started this in 2010, and I'm glad to say that it's still continuing. Even after I retired, my colleague, which I trained for all these years, is carrying on, and currently we do have two very big projects ongoing in the state of São Paulo. They are both on oncology, and in fact 3 projects, and one is a long-term collaboration that we have with the Butantan Institute, which is still ongoing on inflammation. And the same in Argentina, where we actually supported a number of projects, and is still ongoing. What I think is important when you start these projects is to be clear what the objectives are. And that applies to both parties, because then it's clear what the expectations are, and it's clear what you bring to the table and what you expect to get out of the collaboration. And secondly, it's very important to show that you are part of the project as a pharma company. So for example, in our projects, we had follow-up every 2 weeks scientifically, where our specialists in the company will meet with the scientists who were doing the project in Brazil or in Argentina and discuss the science, only the science. And in that way, you create a team. You are not just a pharma company who is coming, or the government who is coming to, give you money. You just create, we are all together. And the number 3 is to create a very good link with the funding authorities. And I'm glad to say that, we had extraordinary relationship with FAPESP all over the years. I'm still in contact with Brito. He's in the UK as well, in Oxford, and we still talk and we still meet occasionally here when we can, as we live in different cities. And that is very important, because if you have clear what each party contributes and which each party responsibilities are, that makes more than half of the chances of success. So we invested during my time, I ran the projects, I created it and I ran it for about 11 years. I mean, we invested nearly about $8 or $9 million in Brazil and something similar in Argentina. And this is a phenomenal amount of investment, but also the model we created was unique. I don't think it has ever been a model before or even after by any pharmaceutical company. And something very important to say is that the projects, the investigators will present projects, and there will be a committee selecting the projects. This committee was totally independent. So GSK wasn't finger pointing, oh, I like this because that suits me better. We told the investigators in which therapeutic areas we wanted to do research, because they are like oncology and so on, and they will put. And the panel of reviewing the project was independent of GSK. FAPESP has their own panel, and then we'll meet together and we'll discuss together and come to an agreement. And in all my 10 years, we never, ever had a disagreement with FAPESP as to what projects had to be funded, which I think is remarkable, in a similar situation in Argentina. So I don't want to, maybe my time is a little bit up, and I don't want to, but I will be happy to ask questions, to answer questions. In particular, what I think is the most important thing is not so much the money. We continue projects today with people who we funded them 5 or 6 years ago. The funding has completed, but they're still working with GSK. And they're still working because they like to work with the scientists, they like the projects are continuing. So the money sometimes is less important. What is important is the trust, and is the way of working together and be open and really have a common goal. So I will leave it here. I'm happy to answer any questions now, or Pedro, whatever you decide is best, you let me know.
Perfect, Dr. Glogger. Thank you very much for outlining the details of this interesting endeavor, and also for commenting on the ingredients that made it so successful. Thank you very much. We, of course, will have plenty of time for discussion and questions right afterwards. Now I would give the floor to Professor Jorge Guimarães, President of Embrapi. Professor, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Pedro. It's a great pleasure to be together with our friends in this meeting. And I congratulate the initiative of the Institute in USP for this kind of subject that we discuss here. Open innovation was created by Henry Chesbrough in 2003. The concept was created at that time. And since then, it has been increasing very much the useful of this concept by companies, universities, startups, and many other participants. But in fact, this concept comes from the other concept, which called the Triple Helix, that was conceived by Ectovix and Leidesdorf at the end of the last century. And this Triple Helix concept, it comes from another subject, which was the so-called science, the endless frontier, created by Vannevar Bush in 1945, because he was involved and prepared the United States to go ahead with the Second World War. The United States was not prepared for that, and Bush was invited by the president to develop this system, and he created several institutes and hired 350 scientists to develop this, prepare the country to be involved to enter, in fact, with the other countries that invited the United States to cooperate, to be prepared to go ahead with the Second World War. And Bush was very expert in engineers. He comes from the MIT, and he decided to accept this invitation. And in 4 years, the United States was prepared to face this big challenge by creating several instruments and ships and submarine and also the radar was the face radar being used to detect the enemies. So this kind of thing that comes together, and finally this concept of open innovation. And of course, it was based on the Triple Helix, where the universities play a very, very important role, and also the government. The government could invest in innovation, and that's why this Triple Helix included the companies, universities, and the other institutes, or research institutes, and government that cooperate with the money. In the most developed countries, this represents about 70% of the money invested in R&D comes from private companies, and at least 30% from the university. Okay, saying that, I would go a little bit about our institution, the EMBRAP. EMBRAP is a quite young institution, was created in 2013 and started operating in 2015. And our subject is open innovation. We are financing open innovation to increase the participation of industries in the development of new products and new process. That is so little time. We involved 1,200 companies and about 17,000 projects. And this means that we invested about $800 million in this subject, divided in three parts: the EMBRAP, the company, and what we call the EMBRAP units. The EMBRAP units are institutions, a group of research selected inside universities and other research institutes to work with the companies at this Triple Helix process. And of course, this is based on the open innovation system. And EMBRAP support industry of development of innovative technology, for development of new products, increasing competitiveness of companies in national and international markets. We say a little bit about the international side of this process. Focus on business demands, offer flexible and very speed and no bureaucratic system to go ahead with these projects. In fact, we share risks of investing in innovation. And by this process, we attract private investment in innovation. The so-called EMBRAP units are center of excellence for R&D and innovation. They have technical skills and the competence, modern facilities, previous experience in developing projects with companies, technological focus, project management skills, and they must be fast in negotiation and contracting projects. And this create a competitive system of selection and accreditation. Today, we have 76 of these units throughout the country, in most of them in the universities, but also in research centers, independent research centers. And these are, at the end of this year, will be more than 100 of these EMBRAP units. And we have a very simple operation system. We provide the resource in advance so that the unit may quickly contract project with the industrial sector. As I said, being very fast, flexible, and no bureaucracy involved. The unit receives financial support to hire qualified Brazilian or foreign research if they need. And the research project is defined directly between the industrial partner and the Embrapa unit. Of course, this project must be in the maturity of the project must be in the so-called TRL 3 to 6, but now we are going also to 7, 8, and 9 technological readiness level of Embrapa projects. The funding system is Embrapa go up to 1/3 of the cost of the projects, and the unit, the Brazilian unit, I mean the Embrapa units, go up to 1/3, and the companies at least 1/3. And in fact, for real data, we are 1/3. The counterpart of the unit are about 17%, and the companies 50%. So the companies put half of this amount of money. We also have an international system to work with our partner throughout the country. At the moment, we have projects together with Netherlands, Israel, United Kingdom, and several countries and the models of European Union, the Cornet, for instance, Eureka, as SME, Germany, with the Fraunhofer system, Canada, the Switzerland, Czech Republic, Sweden, USA, and we start now with Uruguay and Colombia. What to do at this model? Each country has a similar organization as Embrapa. Several of them have this, and this through this system we support projects, international projects, industrial projects. It's not academic partnership; it's international partnership. So this is the system we have been operating, and for these 1,200 companies, we are very happy. They evaluate every project. At the end of the project, they evaluate their satisfaction concerning this the development of this project. And these companies has been shown that the 95% of satisfaction with the project being developed. The international system is very, very important, and has been giving a lot of opportunities to our company, middle-sized company, because the big guns, they know what to do. But the small companies, the startups and the medium-sized companies in Brazil, they need that, and we offer that very much. So, Pedro, I stop here and wait for the questions to be presented later on. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Wonderful, Professor. Thank you for initially doing this interesting historical recap and associating Vannevar Bush Endless Frontier with the Triple Helix and open innovation.
It's today. I read yesterday the science project for the Americans. They invocate the Vannevar Bush process again. Yeah, exactly. This is up to now.
Yeah, exactly. No, wonderful, and also thank you for detailing how Embrapa, which is an institution that has open innovation in its DNA, detailing all the process that it entails. Thank you very much. Now I'm happy to hand over the floor to Bruno Zarpelon from the Brazilian German Chamber in São Paulo. Bruno.
Hi, Pedro. Hi, everyone. So first of all, thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you, Mr. Guimarães. You just shared with us a lot of important information about open innovation. It's almost a class about open innovation. So it's very easy now to talk about this topic. During my individual remarks, I will try to cover 4 topics. I will begin speaking about the German Brazilian Chamber of Commerce industry. I don't know if everyone know already the chamber and what we do related to this topic, open innovation. I also try to speak a little bit about our acceleration program called Startups Connected. I also would like to share with you some information, insights about the evolution of open innovation in the world and also among our member companies. Something interesting, I think so. And I will end talking a little bit about green hydrogen that really brings a good opportunity to open innovation between different countries as well as Brazil and Germany. So starting saying some words about the chamber, I will try to be very fast in this part. The German Chamber of Commerce Industry was founded 105 years ago, and it's part of a global network led by BMWK. BMWK is Bundesministerium für Wirtschaft und Klima. In English is the German Ministry for Economy and Climate. And these chambers are spread around 90 countries with more than 120 offices. So it's really a worldwide network. And this network aims over the world at promoting the bilateral cooperation between Germany and the countries where these chambers are established, in our case in Brazil. And another important goal for our chamber, our network, is promote also the regional activities of German companies. So 100 years before, we started bringing German companies to Brazil. And nowadays we promote the activities of these German companies locally. Of course, we have a very broad portfolio. We work in several areas, but it's very easy to understand what we do when we think that we have these bilateral activities, but also regional activities where we promote locally the activities of the member companies. Here in Brazil, especially in São Paulo, we have around 800 member companies, which represent around 10% of the Brazilian GDP, industrial GDP. It also shows a little bit already the German DNA, the industrial German DNA, also bringing here to São Paulo, Brazil. And 2 of our main pillars in São Paulo are innovation and sustainability, represented by the Department of Innovation and Sustainability, which I have the honor to lead. And this department supports member companies and also German institutions in the journey of the future. And what we would like to say when we say the journey for the futures is trying to anticipate the main challenge and opportunity that the trends are bringing to us. We have nowadays a lot of trends that are shaping the world and the market. And as a chamber, as a platform, we always try to bring and anticipate all challenges and opportunities of all these trends. And we strongly believe also that to talk about the future, we have to seek the convergence between innovation and sustainability. We believe and we see that we cannot talk about innovation without sustainable premise, sustainable values, and also to solve sustainable problems, very difficult to do it without innovation concepts or innovation tools. So we strongly believe, and also we defend the connection, the convergence between innovation and sustainability nowadays. And as the chamber is a platform to promote new business, and we have innovation as one of our pillars, it's very natural for us to work intensely with open innovation. In 2016, we launched a program called Startups Connected. This program aims not to accelerating startups, but to accelerating projects between startups and established companies, German established companies in Brazil. It's a little bit different because we're not a fund that we see the startups as an asset and we like to have a unicorn in the future. But our main goal here is to solve problems from German companies in Brazil through the contact with startups. So really defend this topic and the connection with established companies and startups. And during my speech, guys, I will try to focus on startups, as these are our main focus here in the chamber also. As I say, nowadays, we have anchor companies of this program, companies like BASF, Siemens, Voigt, but also German institutions like GIZ and the VH. GIZ is the German agency for cooperation in developing countries. And the VH is the House of Science Innovation, German Science Innovation in Brazil. They represent some German institutions, German universities. And it's important to say that this initiative, the Startups Connect initiative, placed RH as the top 3 startups ecosystems in Brazil regarding to the ranking promoted by 100 open startups, the main startups ranking in Brazil. So in the last 3 years, we was placed as the top, among the top 10 startups ecosystem in Brazil, and last year as the top 3. We are not a huge initiative like Cubo, Inovabra, but we have a very high quality in the startups that we work. Just an example, I don't know, but Cubo should accelerate more than 100 startups per year, I don't know. We accelerate like 10 or 20 startups, but really seek for real projects when we look for these startups. And that's the main difference of our chamber. And when we look to the evolution of the open innovation in the world, but also among our member companies and the anchor companies of our program, it's something that's very interesting, because in the past, almost everything started in the marketing areas. So 6 years before, when I started to sell some projects related to open innovation, I always did it to the marketing departments or communication departments. Because at that time, the companies that was dealing with open innovation, they was looking for almost all of them brand positioning. And nowadays, when I talk about open innovation in the companies, I almost only talk with the innovation departments. And what it shows that nowadays, the companies are really looking for concrete projects and not only for marketing activities. And it's something that happens in the whole world, but also in our initiative, that's very easy to understand. Another important change that we have related to the open innovation process in the last years is regarding the actors involved in the whole process. Before the companies, and as I say, I'm focusing here in the open innovation with startups. Before some years ago, 10 years ago, some companies, when it started to do open innovation with startups, they only work with startups. They didn't bring other actors to work with them. And nowadays, something very interesting that's happening, that the companies are trying to build open innovation ecosystems, bring not only startups, but also clients and suppliers. BASF are doing it very good in Brazil. They bring like a startup, they bring like a customer, and they co-create something together for the whole value chain. So they can push the innovation through the value chain and also push their markets through the value chain. So this movement to create open innovation ecosystems is something that's happening a lot nowadays. As well, the companies are creating their own hubs, their own spaces, and so on. And just to finish my speech here, we can go deep in other topics later. I would like to share just some information about green hydrogen. These topics are very interesting. It's very interesting for open innovation activities, especially international ones. Once in Brazil, for example, we have a huge opportunity for production application. And in Germany, for example, a huge offer in a wide portfolio of technologies for the energy transitions. So as a result of the importance of this topic for Germany, we are running in Brazil an acceleration program exclusive for startups with solutions for a green hydrogen value chain. And during this year, next year, we will accelerate 24 projects between startups and established companies in Brazil. So we have a lot of good opportunities here in Brazil and also between Brazil and Germany. We as the chamber are always trying to leverage this cooperation between Brazil and Germany, especially between German companies and Brazilian startups. We really do it a lot in the last 5-6 years. And nowadays, the main opportunity that we have for these international open innovation initiatives are related to green hydrogen. So I think that you can go deeper later in some topics, but that's it.
Bruno, thank you very much. I like very much the concept of accelerating projects rather than startups. So I think it's a very result-oriented approach. Congratulations for the program.
Thank you.
I see already some questions from the students in the chat, but before that, I will perhaps pose some questions myself to the panelists. And well, we've talked a lot here about the advantages of open innovation, but still we see that many corporates are still reluctant to this process and open up their R&D. So I may ask to each one of you where you see the risks of open innovation approach and how they can be mitigated. And maybe here I already make a connection with intellectual property. I think that's a big issue and a major factor for reluctance for companies to open up their innovation processes. So maybe if we could start again the same order with Isro.
Yeah, thank you, Pedro. I think I want to say something similar I said before. I think the key, if a company wants to invest, I think the key points are to be what the expectations are when you are investing, what the reality is, and what do you want to take out of the collaboration. So, for example, I'm going to give our own examples. In some particular cases, your expectation is that you want to explore a new area and you want to create new science that then will be a platform for you as a company to do some other things. In that case, you are not expecting to, to recover money. You are not expecting to recover IP. You are expecting to generate information. And that is very important. In other cases, you know that you are investing at risk. And, if I take the totality of the projects that we invested, and it's close to 90, if you take together Argentina, Brazil, Uruguay, etc., you could say that many of them have been very successful. Many of them have published a lot of papers. From the intellectual property point of view, the generation of intellectual property point of view, maybe you are talking about the 10, 15% that have been successful in that area. So one can argue and say, oh, why are you investing? Because, you're only getting, but I'm coming back. From the other ones, there was no IP, but from most of them, there was very important generation of knowledge that many of our scientific teams were able to use. And the question is, when you invest, is I can invest to do a project in Brazil, or in whatever part of the world, if I don't do it in that way, nobody will do it. So that's where my risk is, but I'm generating a reward, because the reward is the generation of data, which otherwise I probably either would not have, or maybe 5 years or 10 years later have to pay billions if somebody, actually a small company, created and have the IP and they want to sell it. So, there are a lot of, now, in regards to IP, what I want to say is that, again, I think you have to be clear with the IP, who owns the IP, and be clear that, whoever owns the IP, you are going to talk to that person and work together. We had a number of cases where, and in Brazil in particular, where, our Brazilian academic colleagues, they created IP and they asked GSK to help them to file the IP. Because we had experts in our company, we have many IP experts that they know all the ways. So we helped them actually to file their own IP. So again, that is what kind of trust and what kind of collaboration, with the cards on the table, you can create. So in my time, we never talked about risks. Yeah, you can say if you're the chairman of R&D, well, I gave you whatever, £1 million per year. I'm not going to recover that. But it's not like that. I gave many internal talks in GSK telling them, what did we recover in terms of what we invested? And it wasn't necessarily money, and people were astonished, because if you had to value in money what we recover in knowledge and so on, and you had to generate this in another way, you are talking about 10, 20 times more than what you invested. It's just that if you put £1 million, you didn't get £10 million, you got knowledge, and that's the difference.
Perfect, Isra. Thank you so much. Maybe Professor Jorge?
Well, of course, it could offer a lot of advantages for the companies to be involved in open access. However, in the case of Brazil, we face a difficult challenge, which is the lack of culture on this subject. So Brazil was maybe one of the countries which did not use the concept of a triple helix that could be started 50 years ago, and they did not. As the many countries in Asiatic countries, they did. And we had the possibility to do that. In 1970, we already have FINEP and BNDES. And of course, CNPq, CAPES, and FAPESP, but we did not create this culture of interaction between companies and research centers, especially universities. We lost a big opportunity for that. Instead, this, especially BNDES and FINEP, decided not to give the money for the companies to develop the research and technology. They try to, let's say, how you say, impress them. Money for the company. Company would not buy money for doing innovation projects. They can buy this money to production, because they can calculate how much it costs and how much they're gonna make, but not for the risk of innovation. And that's why the culture didn't come. So we suffer from these points of lack of culture and lack of company. We have 300 industrial companies in Brazil. Few of them, very few of them, including the big ones, have their own research center. They have no research center. So the open innovation could be a good way to do that, isn't it? For instance, pharmaceutical companies, which, as Israel said, is very a good way to do that, the open innovation process, the triple helix. We do not have that. This 1,200 companies that work with MRP, only four of them are pharmaceutical companies. They are far away from innovation at all. They do not do innovation. They like very much this so-called products that they can easily copy. And so that's our problem. And even the international companies here, they do not do the GSK is, as Israel said, is an example with FAPESP, and of course involving the Triple Helix, because the research are inside the universities. In fact, we try to be involved in this project. I don't know if Israel was in this discussion that together with Melo from FAPESP to involve Embrapa as a partner and putting money for that. But FAPESP accept our participation, but GSK said it was not at that moment they could do this the future and so on. Concerning IP, our system is quite easy. Embrapa does not be requiring to have partnership of the IP, though we insist that this should be done by the company and the Embrapa unit. And as Israel said, the patent can be of both the university and the company, but the exploration of the patent should be the company, because they put half of the money, they know what the market is, they know the risks, they know, so they do not have that's the priority. So we didn't have problem concerned to that. Although most documents in the universe say that the patent belongs to us. So if this is the case, these groups are not being prepared to be an Embrapa unit. That's easy as that. Because academic patents in Brazil does not become explored patent. They don't license that at all. This is goes for the shelf. In many cases, almost all the case, the number of our patents being academic patents be explored are very, very, very small. Though most of the universities has hundreds of these patents, but so on. It doesn't. If the company are not together, there is no way to go ahead with the patent system. So IP for us is quite easy system. I stop here, Peter.
Okay, Professor. Thank you very much for insights. And finally, Bruno.
Okay, so I start talking about the main advantage that open innovation approach brings. I think that the other colleagues has already explained a little bit, but bring a little bit also the experience for the startups ecosystems. When we open with startups, when we do open innovation, also for other partners, the main thing for me is that we expand the universe of potential partners. We bring more people that can cooperate with us. Doing it, we have more chance to find a startup or institutions, for example, that have fits to our challenge. So bring more people, bring more options, you have more chance to find the correct partner. Of course, if you can keep the same quality standard and the same process, the same methods that you already have. So I always say that open innovation is always interesting if you can keep the same standards of our intern innovation process. Because it's a very simple thinking. In Portuguese, we say two heads think better than one. If you bring more people to think with you, to cooperate with you, if you look for more institutions, if you look for 5 and you look for 100, if you look for 100, as I said before, if you can keep the same quality standards, you have more chance to find a good partner if you're looking to 200 startups than if you are looking to 5. Of course, it's very important. You have to keep the same quality standards, the same process, the same methods. Because if you look at, if you don't have it, you try to observe what the evidence can present to you, you have really a very big mess. And that's the problem. And other advantages, some very obvious one, are, for example, increasing the universe of possibilities. You can accelerate the innovation process. As Mr. Guimarães has already said, he's sharing. You can add new skills for the company or for the institutions. You can have also diversity of ideas. You can have ideas for different people that usually don't have contact with them. Diversity is something very important nowadays. Also, when you do open innovation, you facilitate the exploit innovations. Explore, exploit innovations. I think that I've already heard about it. Sorry, just a moment. I'm going to turn the light on. Sorry. Oh. Okay, sorry guys. As I said, you can facilitate and exploit innovations and also innovations for the horizon 3. We have the Tushman methodology that's explained about the horizons of the innovation, horizon 1, 2, and 3, where we explore new markets, adding new values for our portfolio. When you bring new skills, new opportunities, new diversity of ideas, you can also exploit new ideas. And as I said before, you can also involve the value chain. It's something very important. Nowadays, as I said before, the companies are trying to create their innovations ecosystems, bringing customers and clients also to co-create together. And that's happening a lot in Brazil with a lot of companies, and it's something very interesting. And regarding IP, looking to the startups context, normally during the initial stage of the cooperation, IP is not usually a problem, as the parties until this moment, they doesn't realize the value of the solution to be co-created. So they want to co-create together, they have already idea, but they can realize the value that this solution will have. So at this point, as we can not share zero, it's not a problem. But however, as the projects progress, the IP, if there is no prior alignment, can become a problem. It's really become a problem. The main important thing here is always to have an alignment regarding the expectation, investments, and responsibilities of each partner. Because when we co-create, we have two different partners, and each partner have their own responsibility, their own expectation, their own investments in the project. So we have to have very clear this information to be able to talk about IP. If you don't know this information, if you're not aligned, we even can start to talk about IP because we don't have the basic information to do it. I will turn on the light again. Sorry, I don't know what's happening here.
No problem.
Sorry. I will let this. And the other thing that's very important is when you talk about co-creation, usually at least one of the partners are already bringing something, has already developed something. So you have to define and to map what each partner has already developed before the co-creation, before the cooperation, because when we started to talk about IP, you have to have in mind what you have already done before. Because as I said, normally in a co-creation project, at least one of the partners has already developed something. For example, when you are a company cooperates with a startup, the startup has already a solution, has already developed something. The company would like to personalize, customize the solution. So there are already a journey that the startups have done. So we have to consider, have to take into account when we talk about IP. But the main advice I'd like to share with you is you have to have an alignment between the partners. You have to talk about it. You have to bring all the information that you have. And to do it, you have to know about the project. Something that in some cases happens, for example, in our program, the company and startup starts to talk about IP, but they even know the project. They even know the result expectation of this project. They even know the responsibilities of each partner. So you have to define the responsibilities, you have to define which investment, which one you bring for the project, you have to define what each one you bring for the project as infrastructure or as previously projects. to talk about IP. You have to have the correct information to start talking. I have already a lot of problems to companies trying to define the IP with the startups. And when I ask it, but what are the main results? What are the responsibilities of each partner in this project? It was not clear for them. So we have to have at least this information clear to start up talk about IP. If you have this kind of alignment, it's not to be a problem.
Can I make a comment, Pedro, on that? Two comments on the last speakers. You are correct. I mean, in all the agreements that GSK signed, it's absolutely clear how IP is being managed before the agreements are signed. And it's absolutely clear who is contributing, what is the responsibility, when, you know, there could be an occasion where the IP has to be shared or whatever. So that's number one. I think if you are a small company or an academic, you need to make sure when you sign the agreement that you know what you are signing, that you are absolutely clear what are the rules. But secondly, on IP, I think the academic who is generated the IP needs also to have an idea beyond the pharmaceutical company what they want to do with IP. You know, we, in all the projects that we funded, there were a number of projects which generated IP, and you know, they gave us the fair option and we say thank you, but we are not interested, you know, but this is your IP, and under the agreement the academic is free to do what they want. And we found out that some of the academics were struggling a little bit as to how to, if you like, manage their IP to some other parties. And we had one or two occasions, again, where we helped them actually to position themselves to, if you like, to get the interest of somebody else for the IP they already had. So I think it's important for the academic to understand, and not just to say it's my IP, it's my IP. Yeah, it's your IP, but what are you going to do with that? Okay, and that's very important. And finally, I want to bring an example of at least one case in Brazil and one case in Argentina where we said, look, that's great, but GSK is not interested in your IP. And these people actually went on, they formed their own companies, and they're actually working on developing, you know, what they created as an IP. So, you know, again, and that's a very successful way of making use. And for us, when I had to report this back to GSK, I reported this as a success. You know, even though it wasn't for GSK, because GSK didn't use the IP, but for me, it was a success of the program, because the program generated IP, which the academic was able to either create a company or sell it to somebody else. So, you know, there are a lot of, if you like, chromatograms that on the IP and different variations. But I think what has to be clear is, you know, that the IP in itself is of no value if you don't know what to do with your IP.
In our cases, it's the same. Every contract between a company and the Embrapa unit, the way that what they do with the IP must be decide at the beginning, and they write down and they sign that. So, and for instance, from these 1,700 projects, 1,000 was finished, and they give 600 patents. The patent, most of them belongs to the company. Not, but in this case, the university, they must be say, well, we have possibility to be reimbursed by endowment, percentage of the what is sold, and so on. But we insist that the academic patents, it's, as you said, it's difficult to go on. For instance, most of the patents in Brazil, they go up to 30% of the patent belongs to the university. How come? And this doesn't do anything. The research doesn't know what to add. In pharmaceutical industry, it's even more complicated for the university to develop what they help to construct with the companies. So that's why I said in our case it's quite easy.
Perfect. If I may summarize this first round of question as ingredients for a successful, open innovation endeavor, maybe I think the ingredients are trust, as Israel indicated, alignment of expectations, as Bruno indicated, culture of innovation, as Professor Jorge Guimarães indicated, and of course, a sense of purpose, also very important. Thank you very much. We will now go to the questions from the students, and I see there are 6 already, so we will do this in 2 rounds of 3. I will ask the students to pose the questions verbally, 3 of them, and then you can answer them, and then we go to the next round. So first one is Luz Kumba. Luz, please.
Hi, good morning. My name is Luz. I'm a policy advisor here in Washington, D.C. in the United States. And I have a question, very interesting. Thank you so much for your input. I'm new to this concept of innovation diplomacy. As a scientist, I focus mostly on the science diplomacy aspect. And I just wanted to know your definition of this concept according to your current role. Implement the different principles of innovation diplomacy into each one of your roles. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Luz. Now, Christiane Wolf-Suzuki.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm Christiane. I'm a science manager here in Germany. And my question is, if there was any case where the scientific independence of a project outcome was doubted, and if so, how did you handle this? Thank you.
Danke schön, Christiane. Now, Horacio.
Yeah, so I'll read from what I wrote in the in the chat. So when we talk about the relationship between academia and industry, it's not immediately clear that academia will be on board. In many academic fields, there are still prejudices. Many of the new developments include not only the engineering fields, but also less traditionally applicable fields, such as mathematics, for example, in the developing of algorithms. ISRO and others described a successful strategy. So my question for all the panelists is if you could comment on this issue of the tense academic industry relationship from your point of view and experience, and the possible role of science diplomacy or innovation diplomacy to propose solutions and bring the fostering of this type of collaborations forward.
Maybe we can start with Professor Jorge this time.
Well, I didn't get all the questions exactly, but I congratulate the students to be so much interested in this subject. Of course, we
want to get a good grade.
Of course, the open innovation by itself offers the possibility of the diplomacy, scientific diplomacy, because it requires the cooperation among the persons, and they help they develop the country. In our case, for instance, the cooperation with several countries on the subject of developing industrial projects is a kind of diplomacy because most of them includes the embassy, for instance. In the case of Pedro, for instance, they developed some kind of events to explore this possibility. And in few words, open innovation is a kind of scientific diplomacy, as it involves several other partners in other countries. The concept of innovation is, we have several definitions, but they can have here the literature to send to you. But I would suggest the work of Henry Shelbrooke, Open Innovation, the new imperative for creating and profiting from technology between companies and organizations. This is a Harvard Business Press book, so it can be find several definitions, but it does not change too much the involvement of companies and universities and academia in general. That's it.
Bruno?
Pedro, I don't think that I have anything new to add for these questions. I will skip for the next tranche.
Okay, perfect. Then, Israel.
Yeah, so I ask a few things in regards to diplomacy. That's a great question. 6 years ago, the chief scientific officer of the Foreign Office in UK wrote a paper called Science Diplomacy. He presented this to the Parliament of the UK, and his main example was GSK, actually, and I work with him. Science diplomacy sometimes could be very important, in particular when you have situations like countries like, for example, UK and Argentina, where there are tense relationships for other reasons, political, and science can help. And that's been recognized by all parties. So innovation through science plays a major role. I mean, this is one of the things I learned most than anything else in my 10 years doing that. And as Professor Guimarães said, in all the works that we've been involved, always the embassy of the respective country was there, both in the UK embassies in Brazil, Argentina, as well as the other way around. So there is a very, very big, important role to play for science diplomacy, even as a peacemaker in many cases. To Christiane's question about the scientific panel, let me explain you very quickly. When we were selecting projects, or still selecting projects, we had 3 independent panels, not just 1, but 3. We had the panel of FAPESP, which they work completely independently, and they'll take the projects and select them according to their scientists. We had an internal GSK panel, because at the end of the day, we also wanted to make sure we found the science that was interesting to GSK. And we had an independent panel of advisors, which are academics. And what we did in our case, we created a panel of 2 Brazilian scientists, 2 Argentinian scientists, and 1 Mexican scientist. And they worked face-to-face, that was before the pandemic, selecting the projects. And each panel will actually bring, let's say we had 50 projects and we could only select 5. So each panel will actually bring the results. The first time we did that, I didn't sleep the night before, because I was pretty sure that was going to be complete chaos. That one panel will say, for me, 1 to 5 is this, and the other panel will come. Unbelievably, there was a 95% coincidence, because the good science can be seen by every panel. So in most of the cases, we had a complete alignment. In all our history, we had 1 or 2 situations where the panels will basically disagree on an order. That was discussed on a face-to-face meeting with the different panels actually putting their arguments as to why they were thinking. And in general, there was an acceptance, as to, what projects to select. In all our history, or at least in my history, I only had 2 cases of people who actually. We had 2 cases of people who actually were not happy with the decisions and say, oh, I should have been given the grant and I wasn't given the grant. In both cases, I made the point to meet them personally, to each of them, and explain exactly the situations and what was the process and for what reason, their projects didn't make it. And we had one of those cases where subsequently, in another call, the project was accepted. So I think that gave a lot of credibility to the program because it was really, truly independent. I don't know, Christian, if that answers your questions.
Well, I actually was thinking about the project outcome. So at the end of the project, if there was any steering, like a peer, a scientific colleague or whatever that criticized the project outcome, like the result, that it wasn't really
right.
It was kind of influenced by your company, maybe.
Yeah. No, I mean, in general, as I say, we had regular scientific meetings with the project during the duration of the whole project. And at the end of the day, there was usually joint publications. So we never had a situation that somebody criticized and oh, you were influenced by the company. Not to my knowledge, never. In fact, the other way around, because in many projects, there was a publication which justified. I mean, we had a number of scientists in Argentina who actually, thanks to these projects, actually completed thesis of PhD, completed thesis of a master, got actually promoted, from senior leader to very senior team leader. It was a good development for their careers as well. So not as far as I know, we never had a controversy on that at that level. No.
Thank you.
I would add some information about the concept of innovation. There is a very nice work by Stahl and other collaborators from 2014 called the concept of open innovation and the involvement of Brazilian enterprise. Isso está this is in the Revista de Administração e Inovação, number 11, page 295 to 320. This is a very good paper that concerns this open innovation in Brazil.
Pedro, can I make one more comment in regards to Horacio's comment?
Yes,
if
please
I
do,
might.
and then Bruno, and then we go to the final 3 questions. Yeah.
Okay, just a very brief comment. Horacio mentioned in his question about the tense relationships between academia and industry. I have to say that in our experience, the tense relationships were between academics. And a number of times when we were working with the consortium, we had to intervene to calm down different conflicts that arise in between different groups actually collaborating in the project. And that I thought that was an odd situation, but it happened more than once. So sometimes they tend to be or at least we found that tend to be a competition between the academic groups, and the relationship was much better with the pharma company in each of these groups independently.
Yeah, no, what I meant is the fact that there are prejudices in academia against collaborations with industry. And I mean, I remember in Argentina, there was a mathematician who, the moment, I think it was a woman, she learned that whatever she was doing had any type of application, she would claim to change fields of research to another one that doesn't have any application. So sometimes the culture is complicated. So that was my aim.
Okay. Thanks.
Bruno, yes.
Pedro, I would like just to name an initiative that's for me represents very good innovation diplomacy, a German initiative. I think that almost everyone here call it Industry 4.0. Industry 4.0 for me is a very good example of innovation diplomacy. Of course, it has not been built only for diplomacy, of course we know it, but it involves a lot of politics. For who that has already learned about Industry 4.0, they know that some movement, it's a brand created by the German government. It's not just like a movement, a natural movement. It's really something very pragmatic and planned before. It was planned before. I will not go deeper on this topic, but for me, thinking about innovation diplomacy, a very recent initiative, and big one that represented is the movement of Industry 4.0 built by the German government.
Thank you, Bruno. Indeed, a very interesting case of branding and very successful as well. Let me go then to the final three questions, and then I would, I would ask everyone to be very brief, both the ones who are posing the questions and the ones who are answering them. Ana Maria.
Okay, thank you so much, all the speakers. In short, my question is to Jorge. What is needed? What do you think is needed to improve the interactions between university and industry in Brazil?
Thank you, Ana. And now Carlos Panek.
Hello, can you hear me well?
Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect. So I'm Brazilian and Polish, living in Poland for 10 years, but when I used to live in Brazil, I remember of the technological park, which is an investment between the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro and Petrobras. And from what I'm not up to date, but from what I recall, it was some sort of a flagship initiative between the industry and scientific institution, one of the main institutions of universities of Brazil. And now I'm a little bit shocked to see that this hasn't moved forward. So I'm asking, I would like to know if it's why couldn't this, did it turn out not to be a success story, or if yes, the Brazilian academia couldn't develop it because of the culture, as Mr. Guimarães says. So if you can eventually use these or other examples to see why you're having this discussion that it should be more invested, because I know this technological park exists for a decade. So why didn't we go further than this? Thank you.
Thank you, Carlos. And now, Luciana.
Thank you. I'm Luciana. I'm a federal public defender in Brazil, and I'm also a researcher. Thank you so much, Dr. Jorge, Dr. Israel, and thank you, Bruno, and also thank you very much, Pedro. I would like to know if in these programs of acceleration of innovation, if there is any express consideration of ESG or environment, social, and governance factors, and how do you do and measure that? And in broad, which is the relation of innovation, diplomacy, and ESG? Thank you.
Thank you, Luciana. Now maybe we can start with Bruno.
Okay, I will focus on the last questions. The last question, I think that's where I can add more value. Talking about ESG and innovation, as I said before in the beginning of my speech, our department nowadays calls it Innovation and Sustainability Department. When I changed the name of the department, I had the idea to change the name for the Department of the Future, Department for the Future, because the main idea here is to talk about the future, to talk about transformation. And to talk about transformation, to talk about the future, you have to bring together innovation and sustainability. We cannot think in innovation without sustainable values. As well, we cannot think to solve sustainable problems without innovation premise or innovation tools. So the convergence between the two topics is necessary for me, and not only for me, but when we look at other countries or groups, regions like European Union, they also promoting some movements. A very important one is called green and digital transition. So nowadays, the both topics are very near. We can talk about green economy, for example, that bring the both topics. When you talk about green economy, we are talking about innovation, we're talking about sustainability, we're talking about ESG. And when you're talking about ESG, we're talking about sustainability. The only change that we have between ESG and sustainability is the G, that in the ESG is governance. And when we look for sustainability, we're talking about economy. But economy governance are a little bit similar. But just finishing this topic, I think that we have to bring the both topics together when we talk about innovation projects or projects that would like to transform something. Regarding acceleration program, our acceleration program specific, we use some sustainable criteria to find the best startups, not only sustainable criteria, but also sustainable criteria like diversity of the founders, where are these people, what are the main goals that the startup has? Is it a impact business or not? Is it a clean tech or not? So we always try to bring some sustainable criteria to find and select the startups, as well as almost all the projects that we accelerated in the past. We calculated it some months ago. Almost 80% of the projects that we accelerate are related to sustainability. It was not something that we proactive, something that we ask for our companies. You have to present sustainable challenge to work with startups. No, it was something that natural happened. BSF, for example, look for single-use plastic. Bayer looking for sustainable solution for agro-industry. So all the companies now, almost of them are seeking for sustainable problems or sustainable challenges. So we always try to bring also this kind of information, criteria, and also goals to our acceleration programs.
Perfect. Perfect, Bruno. Thank you very much. I would kindly ask Israel and also Professor Jorge to be brief since we are almost reaching the end. So Israel, please.
I think it will be better if Professor Guimarães speaks, because there were two questions directly at him, and I think he, specific for Brazil. So I think it will be better. I probably don't have a lot to add. So okay. Professor Guimarães, I think it will be better you actually take the floor.
Okay, Ana Maria, the model of the Embrapa is quite simple. We select groups, not individuals, but groups of research inside universities that have a focus in some subject. Let's say robotics, for instance. So they outwork in this subject, and they are a group, belongs to one or two or several departments, but most of them are only one department. We do not contract the whole department or the whole institute, but the group. They applied for that by public calls, and they're very competitive. And once they attend our requirements, they are approved and selected, accredited for 6 years, and they present a plan of action for 6 years, saying how many projects they intend to develop with so many companies, and they must show they have some experience with work with the companies because of the culture that it required, and then they become a selected and accredited Embrapa unity. And for that plan of action, they say how much money they need for that. And if you accept that, usually they are very qualified. They have the equipment. Everything is okay, and then we select them. We put the money for that. That's 1/3 of the project they contract with companies. So it's quite simple. And then we follow up that every day. Because our projects are online, and we follow it every day. and as soon as the 80% of our money is spent, we have 10 days to put it back, and do that by phone. So no bureaucracy at all. So that's the system that you have some difficulty, yes, where? With the juridic part of the university. The so-called procuradores are the very difficult individuals to understand what this model is. And with some exceptions, most of them give us a lot of headache to put this going on. So the innovation cannot wait for months or years. They must be doing days. And some of our contracts, the good units, they must take 2 or 3 or 4 days. 1 month, you are already preoccupied. So the system is quite simple. Carlos' question, I don't remember what Carlos...
Carlos asked about technology parks, and especially the one in UFRJ with Petrobras, and about maybe you can give a general view about the success of technology parks in Brazil, whether they have evolved or not.
Well, it's interesting, but most of our units are not inside of a technological park. For instance, the best one here at the Catholic University here in Porto Alegre has a huge technological park, no units inside. Somehow they are not discovering what the university may have some units. In this case, they not, but the technological park, no. The case of UFRJ, you have a copy. Copy is a unit of Embrapa, very involved with the petroleum and gas and with Petrobras. So, but in this case, this unit is inside of the so-called technological park. But that's an open technological park, not very close as most of them. So we expect to work with the technological park, but somehow it does not work very much yet. To have a good one in Pernambuco, the César, but this again is an ecosystem more than a technological park.
Perfect, Professor. I would like to thank all the panelists, Isro, Professor Jorge, Bruno. Very insightful, very vibrant discussion. Also, thank the participants for the wonderful questions.